temple to Artemis, one of the largest buildings ever built, sitting at about 337 feet long. If you've ever been on a soccer pitch, it's bigger than a normal football field. It's about 30 feet wider and 30 feet longer than a professional soccer field, 60 feet high. This is what they call the Neocorus, the home. Think of it as the center or hub of Artemis worship. Artemis, as you can see, is the god of fertility and purity. Outside of this amazing structure was a garden. They call it the Paradisios. We call it paradise. And in the paradise of this god of fertility was a tree. They call it the tree of life. And supposedly Artemis was born from the soil under this tree of life. You can see it on the coin. There's a palm tree. That is what they would call the tree of life. And Artemis came from the ground under this palm tree and was born. And you're going to find household gods everywhere through Ephesus. Every year, they would have a procession of Artemis. We actually have inscriptions from 104 AD that detail out what this procession was like. Every 2 weeks, they would have a smaller procession, but once a year, they would have the massive festivals of Artemis, and they would have sayings like "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians! Great is Artemis of the Ephesians!" You might remember something out of Acts when Paul steps into the theater, and they're chanting that for 2 hours. The 6-foot goddess is still standing in Ephesus. They found it. It was buried. It's a creepy, creepy place. My kids didn't even like staying in there. Zach, my oldest, was like, I just can't even be in this room. They literally had, one is like 6 or 7 feet tall, and the other one's about 6 foot tall. And they're looking across the room at each other. And you stand there, and you realize that this goddess was carried through the streets, and the whole concept was every year we had to go and clean it and purify it again. So they'd take it down to the bay, wash it up so it became pure again, and then they'd march it back. Well, this concept of her restoring her purity or her virginity meant that obviously on the way back you made sure that she lost it. So outside of this temple of Artemis in the paradise, underneath the tree of life, you would practice open sexual acts. How do you bring Christianity to this? How do you bring the gospel message to this just pagan people? Timothy, during the festival of Artemis, stands in front of the processions and begins to preach. "O men of Ephesus, depart from your wicked idolatry and turn to the one true God." Well, they didn't like that. They grabbed him, drug him through Harbor Street, beat him, and killed him on the streets. I think it worked. I think Ephesus woke up. Hundreds of years, you see this influence of Ephesus. It becomes one of the main churches, if the main church, in the Christian movement up until about 400 AD. The question I wrote in my notes, I struggle with, what does love look like today? It's easy to look through this story and go, Ephesus, you lost your love because you were dying. Church, we're losing our love because we're living. We're so wrapped up in living that we forgot about love. I don't know how the letter to the church of Summitville would look, but I think God would have something to say and say, guys, love before anything. And if we do, then the world is changed. Then the empires crumble. Not about truth, not about living, love first. If we do that, we keep his commandments, it says. Help us to love unconditionally.